So okay, we're going to do a quick look into yokes, kind of replacing waistband vibe with the basic bodice. So I'm going to trace my sloper. And the thing is, like, a lot of times what appears like a waistband because it's up like in the waist area, like I think of a waistband as a straight grain band, almost like a ribbon that goes around the natural waist. Whenever you get a shaped waistband, even though it looks like a waistband, it's actually a yoke. So what I'm saying is I can do this by slashing or by pivoting. So let me do one. Should I do one by pivoting? Give me one sec, guys. Okay, no, I'm gonna let's see. There's different ways to do it, so maybe I'll just trace two. So student I was talking with wanted to make an armhole princess bodice with this, like, seems like a super high waistband. I don't have the picture in front of me right now, but it's so great to work on these things with a picture in front of you, for sure. So let's say I have my bodice and I'm going to rotate, pivot the dart closed. Now the thing is, I'm going to use like a marking here and here. Now I want see, this becomes, do you see this piece right here? This becomes the quote-unquote waistband pattern piece. You see what I mean? And then the other piece would be, I kind of have to make a temporary marking on my pattern so I can see where that line was. The other pattern piece will be this. See me? So this is pattern piece number 1. This is pattern piece number 2. Now this isn't an armhole princess yet, like my student was asking about, but there are 2 separate pattern pieces here now. So these are going to, this one's going to have a small dart in it. And the thing is, when you work with your sloper and you do manipulations, you do the work on one sheet of paper, but you need a fresh sheet of paper to get your separated pattern pieces, because these 2 pieces, there's no room for seam allowance here, right? So I will end up tracing one pattern piece like this, pattern piece number 1, and pattern piece number 2 like this. I can put grain line on each one, even though I really only need grain line on my final piece. This is just to illustrate a point. But what I'm really going to do is take a fresh sheet of paper and I'm going to trace. Oh, wait, this is 2 pieces of paper. I didn't know it was. Excuse me. What just happened? So I can take my plot or my draft here, and then I can trace the new pattern pieces. So pattern piece number 1, I would use a ruler to do this clean, but I just want to show you that this big panel is my quote-unquote waistband. You know, I might say cut on fold because I want it to have no seam. Cut 1 on fold, center front. Okay, and then the second piece, I'll separate it away so that this piece can get the seam allowance all around it so that I can actually sew it, right? Which I also do with my ruler, but for the sake of this example, I'm saving time. Now the only other piece that's missing for my friend is that this isn't an armhole princess. So if I wanted an armhole princess seam, that means I would be pivoting, slashing and pivoting this piece. So let's do it. Another option would be to create the armhole princess draft beforehand and then create the separate panel. And those of you who are in my pattern making course, the textbook we use has a draft for Armhole Princess in it that's more thorough. But what I'm going to show you right now is simply that an armhole princess is dart. It goes into the armhole. It doesn't have to be into the notch. It can be anywhere I want. So I get to decide. And then I'm going to use the slash method to, hang on, cut out my pattern. This was kind of an impromptu demo, so bear with me. That's all I need to cut. And then I'm going to slash to, but not through the dart point. And look what happens, my dear. When I close the dart, and I don't have to close it all the way either. It doesn't matter because it's an armhole princess, which means there's going to be a curved seam that goes all the way. Let me draw you a sketch really quick. So here's your model. Here's her bodice. I'm talking about a bodice that looks like this, armhole princess, and then like this. I can't remember exactly what her dress looked like, but it was something like, imagine something like this, right? So we created this panel piece, and now we're creating this piece. And so what happens is we get two new pattern pieces. One thing is I want to create a curve on it. So I can literally curve this. Let's say that goes up 1/2 inch. And so I can go up 1/2 inch here, and that creates the nice curve. Or another way I can create that is to cut it, slash it, and move it. So if I'm going to do that, I want to make sure I have a notch that's going to help me sew the area around the bust, because we might get some ease in here. So let me show you really quick. Now I wish I had tape. You see the curve that I added, so that it wouldn't be a square princess line, so that it would be a nice curved one. Now I have Armhole Princess Bodice Piece 1 and Armhole Princess Bodice Piece 2. You see that? With the curve. And I no longer need this little dart here. So I have 3 pattern pieces for my bodice. Piece 1, piece 2, and piece 3. Piece 1, piece 2, and piece 3. Just remember that this notch matches this notch when I sew. And what was the other thing I wanted to say? Hopefully that answers your question. And remember that you can keep designing at this point. You can create a new armhole shape. You could create a new neckline shape, right? And if you watch my other videos about creating a facing, you can create a facing for your armhole and for your neckline. And so that would become this, and that would become this. I just redesigned the bodice. And actually I feel like, remember, you can always adjust your patterns and your sketches as the design evolves. That's called design process. And it's only done when you say it's done and you've tested it and it works, right? Okay, so I hope that was helpful. Now all 3 of these pieces, just like this piece and this piece also need to be traced on center front, grain line on fold, or cut two if you want to have a seam down center front. And they all need to have seam allowance added to them. So how do I do that? By retracing the exact same piece. Use a ruler, use a very sharp pencil. Yeah. And make sure that your grain line is still parallel to center front for most. Make sure you cut on fold if you want it cut on fold. And another thing I can do that would be helpful in this pattern is to add a notch just for sewing ease. Either I can notch center front or add a notch right here. That's just going to help me when I sew to line things, the puzzle pieces up just right. But remember, all these pieces need seam allowance. Okay, love ya. Bye.